The story opens on a warm summer day, the sky clear and inviting, with a gentle breeze rustling the leaves. It's the day of the annual Family BBQ, a cherished event where friends and relatives gather, laugh, and share good food and memories. I've been bustling around since morning, preparing dishes and setting up the patio, eager to create a welcoming space. My husband James is beside me, grilling and joking with everyone, his boisterous laughter blending with the happy chatter around us. Among the familiar faces, one stands out. Richard, James's longtime friend, has arrived a little later than usual. His presence brings a subtle but noticeable change in the air, a quiet gravity that draws my attention more than I'd like to admit. At 65, Richard carries an elegance and warmth that's softened with age, but his confidence is unmistakable. His salt and pepper hair, his knowing smile, and the way he moves, all these details seem to hold my gaze a little too long. We exchange friendly smiles as he approaches me, holding out a dish he brought, some homemade guacamole. "Hope this adds a little flavor to the spread," he says, his voice deep and steady, with a hint of humor that's always been his trademark. There's something reassuring about him, something that makes me feel at ease and at the same time on edge. Our conversations are casual at first about the food, the weather, and the latest happenings in his life, but as the BBQ progresses, I catch him glancing at me, his gaze lingering just a moment longer than necessary. Each time I look away, my pulse quickens slightly, a reaction I can't quite control. As the afternoon sun begins to dip, the mood shifts. People gather in smaller groups, laughing, sipping drinks, and savoring the evening's calm. I find myself near the corner of the patio, catching my breath after all the work, watching the others. It's then that I notice Richard approaching, his expression thoughtful. He stands close, just a bit nearer than usual, his presence warm and grounded. "Need a break from hosting?" he asks, a glint of understanding in his eyes. I chuckle softly, nodding, the slight exhaustion mixing with an odd exhilaration I can't quite place. We settle into a quiet conversation, our words flowing easily, even as a deeper undercurrent hums between us. He leans his shoulder against the wooden beam of the patio, crossing his arms in that relaxed, unhurried way he has. "You've done a wonderful job today," he says, his voice low, carrying an unexpected softness. "You always make things feel so welcoming." There's a warmth in his words, an appreciation that feels personal, directed solely at me. I brush a strand of hair behind my ear, feeling the faintest blush rise in my cheeks. "Thank you, Richard," I reply, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's good to have everyone here, especially you. James always says you're the life of the party." His gaze doesn't waver, and I can feel it, as palpable as the summer air around us. "James is lucky," he says after a beat, his words lingering with a weight that makes my pulse flutter unexpectedly, not just for the BBQs but for having you by his side. I'm momentarily stunned, not by the words themselves but by the way he says them, a warmth, a quiet intensity that goes beyond casual flattery. For a moment our eyes meet, and there's something unspoken that passes between us, a depth I hadn't anticipated, a vulnerability I can't ignore. Someone calls for Richard from across the yard, breaking the moment. He gives me a small, almost regretful smile before he excuses himself, but I'm left standing there, replaying his words, the subtle richness in his tone. As the evening goes on, I find myself unconsciously looking for him, my gaze drifting his way without thinking, and each time he's there, catching my eye with that same unwavering gaze. By the time the sun dips below the horizon and the first stars emerge, most of the guests have either left or migrated indoors, leaving just a handful of us on the patio. My husband has joined a lively group near the grill, deep in conversation. I find myself once again on the edge of the patio, leaning against the railing, gazing out at the twinkling lights and the glow of the fire pit nearby. Richard approaches again, carrying 2 glasses of wine. He hands me one with a quiet smile, and I accept it, our fingers brushing as the glass changes hands. A slight shiver runs up my arm at the contact, though I'm not entirely sure why. We stand side by side, both sipping our wine in silence, the comfortable quietness punctuated only by the soft sounds of the evening. After a few moments, he speaks, his voice barely above a murmur. "You seem thoughtful," he says, glancing at me with that same searching look. "Everything all right?" I hesitate, my mind a flurry of scattered thoughts and feelings I can't quite piece together. I start, my words faltering. Sometimes it feels like life goes by so fast, like I'm always moving from one thing to the next. I glance down at the glass, trying to gather my thoughts. And then there are moments like this, where it feels like time stops and everything just settles. Richard nods, his gaze steady and understanding. Those are the moments to hold on to, he says quietly. The ones that remind us to breathe, to really feel. He pauses, his eyes softening as they meet mine. You deserve more of those moments. His words hang in the air, and there's something about the way he says it, as if he knows exactly how I feel, as if he sees the parts of me I keep hidden, even from myself. For the first time in a long while, I feel seen not just as a hostess, a wife, or a friend, but as myself, as a person with dreams, thoughts, and emotions that go unspoken. Without realizing it, I take a step closer to him, feeling a warmth that goes beyond the summer night. He doesn't move away. Instead, he seems to lean into the moment, his gaze softening as he looks at me, his expression thoughtful and open. The air between us feels charged, electric, and I can feel my pulse quicken, each beat echoing in the silence. There's a magnetism in Richard's gaze, something deep and unspoken, as if he's holding back words he knows he shouldn't say. I can't seem to look away, caught in the quiet intensity of his expression, the subtle tension that binds us together in this fleeting, undeniable moment. Slowly, he reaches out, his hand grazing my arm, the touch light as a whisper. My skin tingles beneath his fingertips, a rush of warmth spreading from that single point of contact, stirring feelings I hadn't even realized were there. His touch lingers, not out of hesitation, but as if he's savoring the moment, each second stretching, as if time itself is bending to accommodate something inevitable. Do you ever think about things you've never done? He murmurs, his voice barely a breath above the summer air, his gaze fixed on mine. There's an unguarded look in his eyes, a vulnerability I hadn't expected, and it draws me in even closer. The question catches me off guard, and for a moment, I struggle to find my voice. Sometimes I reply softly, feeling an undeniable pull in his words, a resonance that goes beyond the surface. I think everyone has things they wonder about, paths they never took. He nods, as if understanding, his hand still resting on my arm, grounding me, yet urging me towards something unknown. Sometimes those paths don't stay in the past, he says, his voice deepening with an unmistakable intensity. Sometimes they're closer than we think. His words send a shiver through me, and I can feel my heart pounding, my breath quickening as the space between us seems to shrink. Every detail of him feels vivid, his hand on my arm, the warmth radiating from him, the depth in his eyes that mirrors something in my own heart. I'm not sure who leans in first, but suddenly the distance is gone, and I feel his breath on my skin, warm and close. Richard, I whisper, though I don't quite know what I mean to say, if I mean to say anything at all. His name lingers in the air between us, a bridge spanning the unspoken, drawing us even closer. And then, slowly, he leans in, his lips brushing mine in a tentative, feather-light touch that feels like both a question and an answer. The sensation is almost overwhelming, a gentle exploration, a quiet acknowledgement of something we've both felt but never named. His hand moves up to my cheek, his fingers warm and steady, as if anchoring us in this moment, refusing to let it slip away. I find myself responding, leaning into the kiss, my heart racing with an intensity I hadn't felt in years. There's a softness in his touch, a care that feels both thrilling and comforting, and I feel myself melting into him, my thoughts dissolving into the sensation of his lips, the warmth of his body against mine. Time seems to blur as our kiss deepens, as if the world around us has faded, leaving only this shared connection, this undeniable pull that defies everything we know yet feels completely natural. His fingers brush along my jaw, gentle yet possessive, and I can feel a thrill running through me, igniting something raw and real. We pull back slowly, both of us breathing heavily, the silence between us filled with an understanding that goes beyond words. I look up at him, my gaze meeting his, and I see the same intensity mirrored in his eyes, a blend of wonder and desire that leaves me feeling both vulnerable and exhilarated. I didn't expect. I stammer softly, feeling the weight of the moment settle over us. Neither did I, he replies, his voice hushed, his gaze never leaving mine. But I don't regret it. His words hang in the air, and I feel my heart swell with a mixture of relief and anticipation, as if this moment has unlocked something within me, something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. There's a tenderness in his expression, a quiet resolve that makes me feel safe, understood, and profoundly alive. We stand there, wrapped in the glow of the evening, as if we're the only two people in the world, bound by a shared secret that neither of us can deny. The intensity of our connection lingers, filling every space between us, leaving me breathless and wanting more. As we stand there, the weight of what just happened settles between us, heavy yet exhilarating, tethering us in a moment we both know we can't ignore. Richard's hand lingers on my arm, his thumb gently tracing small, slow circles that send a ripple of warmth through me. My mind races, a storm of emotions, guilt, excitement, and a strange, undeniable sense of freedom. It's as if in that kiss, we unlocked something buried, something I hadn't dared to feel in years. He takes a deep breath, his gaze unwavering, as if searching my face for answers to questions he hasn't voiced. I don't know where this is going, he says softly, his words laced with honesty, but I don't want to pretend that I don't feel something here. His words resonate deeply, echoing the thoughts tumbling in my mind. I've always been so careful, always playing by the rules, yet here, in the quiet intimacy of this evening, those rules feel distant and blurred. I don't know what to say, so I simply nod, feeling a strange calm settle over me as I let myself be in the moment, without judgment, without restraint. We hear laughter from the other side of the yard, reminding us that we're not alone, that the rest of the world still exists beyond this charged connection between us. Richard gives my hand a gentle squeeze before letting it fall, his expression softening as he steps back, though the tension between us remains. The evening continues, the conversations and laughter weaving around us, but my mind is elsewhere, replaying every glance, every touch, every whispered word. I feel his presence wherever he moves, a constant, steady warmth that seems to anchor me. Even when we're apart, there's an invisible thread connecting us, drawing me back to him with each passing moment. As the last guests begin to leave, my husband heads inside to tidy up, leaving me and Richard alone on the patio once more. The silence between us feels heavier this time, filled with an unspoken anticipation that neither of us can ignore. Richard steps closer, his gaze intense, and I feel my breath catch as he reaches out, his hand brushing against mine. I should go, he says quietly, though there's a reluctance in his voice, a quiet longing that matches my own. I hesitate, glancing toward the house, knowing that this is a turning point, a moment where choices must be made, lines drawn. But as I look back at him, I feel the pull once more, that same magnetic connection that defies everything else. Wait, I whisper, my voice barely audible, but he hears it, his expression softening, his eyes meeting mine with a depth that makes my heart race. We stand there, the world around us fading as he steps closer, his hand finding mine, his touch both grounding and electric. Slowly, deliberately, he leans in, his lips brushing mine once more, this time with a tenderness that makes my heart ache. It's a gentle, lingering kiss, one that speaks of a connection neither of us can deny. My mind swims with a mix of emotions, the weight of what we're doing pressing down on me even as I feel a sense of freedom, of release in his arms. It's as if, for the first time, I'm allowing myself to feel something real, something that goes beyond the confines of responsibility and expectation. When we pull back, our eyes meet, and I can see the same mix of emotions reflected in his gaze: regret, wonder, and an undeniable connection that neither of us can walk away from. We stand there in silence, both of us caught in the gravity of what just happened, of what it means for us, for everyone else. Finally, he speaks, his voice barely above a whisper. I never meant for this to happen, but I don't want to pretend it didn't. His words send a jolt through me, and I feel a strange comfort in knowing that I'm not alone in this, that he feels it too, the pull, the connection, the inevitability of what's unfolding between us. I nod, unable to find the right words, but he understands, his hand still holding mine, a quiet strength that steadies me. The night draws on, the weight of our shared secret settling between us, a bond that we know will linger, shaping everything that comes next. We exchange a final, lingering look before he steps back, his fingers slipping from mine, leaving me feeling both exhilarated and adrift. As Richard steps back, I feel the emptiness his absence leaves, a hollow echo of a connection we've both acknowledged but can't fully embrace. He gives me one last lingering glance, his eyes saying all the words we dare not speak aloud. Without another word, he turns and heads toward his car, his figure fading into the night as he disappears down the driveway. I stand there alone, the cool night air brushing against my skin, a stark contrast to the warmth that still tingles where he touched me. My mind spins with the gravity of what just happened, replaying each moment, each shared glance, every soft-spoken word. I feel both exhilarated and unnerved, like I've stepped onto a path from which there is no turning back. This isn't just a fleeting impulse, it's a longing, a desire that has taken root, something that will stay with me, no matter what happens next. When I finally make my way back inside, I find my husband finishing up the last of the dishes, his back turned to me as he hums to himself, oblivious to the turmoil that's just taken place outside. Guilt prickles at the edges of my mind, but it's muted, overshadowed by the lingering warmth of Richard's touch, the way he looked at me as though I were the only person in the world. The contrast between the steady, comfortable life I've built and the fire that Richard has ignited within me is almost overwhelming, and I find myself at a loss, caught between two opposing forces, each as compelling as the other. Days pass, but the memory of that evening stays with me, a constant, unyielding presence that colors everything else. I try to return to the routine, to the rhythm of everyday life, but it's impossible to shake the thoughts of him, of the way his eyes had looked into mine, so deeply, so honestly. I catch myself glancing at my phone, wondering if he'll reach out, if he's as consumed by this as I am. But there's nothing, only silence, a silence that feels louder with each passing day. And then, one afternoon, as I'm going about my usual errands, my phone buzzes. My heart leaps when I see his name, my hands trembling slightly as I open the message. It's brief, simple, but the words send a rush of warmth through me. I can't stop thinking about you. Can we meet? I hesitate, my mind racing with questions, doubts, and the undeniable pull that brought us together in the first place. I know that meeting him is a line that, once crossed, will change everything, that there's no going back. But the thought of not seeing him, of letting this connection fade without knowing where it could lead, feels even more unbearable. After a few moments, I type a reply, my fingers moving almost on their own. Yes. Tomorrow? The hours that follow are a blur, my thoughts consumed by what's to come, by the implications of my decision. The anticipation builds slowly, a steady hum beneath my skin that makes it hard to focus on anything else. That night, as I lie next to my husband, his familiar presence feels like both a comfort and a reminder of the line I'm about to cross. I close my eyes, letting the quiet darkness wash over me, knowing that tomorrow will bring something I can't yet fully comprehend. The next day, I find myself at the small cafe where we agreed to meet, my heart pounding as I sit by the window, watching the world go by. Each time the door opens, my breath catches, a rush of anticipation that leaves me feeling both thrilled and unnerved. And then he's there, stepping into the cafe with a quiet confidence, his gaze searching the room until it finds me. As he approaches, our eyes meet, and the tension between us feels almost tangible, a silent understanding that neither of us can deny. He sits across from me, his expression a mixture of warmth and uncertainty, as if he too is caught between what he feels and what he knows is right. For a few moments, we simply look at each other, the silence filled with everything unspoken. Finally, he reaches across the table, his hand covering mine in a gesture that feels both familiar and forbidden. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about you," he says softly, his words filled with an honesty that takes my breath away. "Me neither," I admit, my voice barely a whisper, the weight of the confession settling between us. "I don't know what this is, but I don't want to ignore it." His fingers tighten around mine, a silent reassurance that we're in this together, that whatever happens next is a choice we're both making. "Neither do I," he murmurs, his gaze softening, a warmth in his eyes that makes my heart ache with both desire and fear. The conversation flows from there, tentative at first, then growing in intensity as we let ourselves speak openly, finally acknowledging the connection we've felt but haven't dared to name. With each word, each glance, the boundaries we've built around ourselves begin to dissolve, replaced by something raw, real, and undeniable. As the afternoon wears on, the cafe empties, and the world outside fades, leaving only us, two people bound by a connection that feels as inevitable as it is forbidden. Eventually, he suggests a walk, and we step outside, the crisp air refreshing against the tension that's been building between us. We walk in comfortable silence, our hands occasionally brushing, each touch sending a thrill through me that I can't ignore. We find ourselves by the edge of the park, the quietness of the evening settling around us, a soft, gentle cocoon that feels worlds away from the reality waiting for us beyond this moment. He turns to me, his gaze intense, filled with an emotion I can't quite place but feel deeply in my own heart. And then, without a word, he reaches out, pulling me close, his arms wrapping around me in an embrace that feels like coming home, like finding something I didn't even know I'd been missing. His lips find mine, a kiss that's both tender and hungry, a culmination of every glance, every touch, every unspoken word that's passed between us. The world falls away as we lose ourselves in each other, the boundaries we've carefully maintained shattering in an instant, replaced by a raw, aching desire that feels both thrilling and terrifying. His hands move to my face, cradling me gently as he deepens the kiss, his touch igniting a fire within me that refuses to be contained. In that moment, everything else fades, the obligations, the doubts, the consequences. It's just us, two souls drawn together by something powerful, something neither of us can deny. And as we stand there wrapped in each other's arms, I know that we've crossed a line, that there's no going back to the way things were. We've stepped into a new world, one where the rules we once held so tightly no longer apply. As the evening darkens around us, we finally pull back, both of us breathing heavily, the reality of what just happened settling over us. There's a vulnerability in his eyes, a quiet understanding that speaks volumes, and I feel my own heart mirror his, caught in a mixture of exhilaration and regret. "I don't know where this will lead," he says softly, his voice thick with emotion, "but I don't want to let it go."